So we use this exercise as an introduction to privilege. And the reason we use it, it was written by Steve Robbins. I've adapted it from Pamela Johnson. And the idea is that handedness typically doesn't carry as much emotion to it as privilege, and other various discussions about privilege does. Now, the comment was that you should switch hands, and we've, in developing and further going along in the exercise, is we make certain that everyone uses left hands, because we want, and I have yet so far, knock on wood, and I know I teach statistics, so I got the probability part, but so far I've always had at least one or two people that are left-handed in every group I've done. And they're like, yeah, this rocks, right? No problem. I can do this one. This one's easy. One, it's an unearned privilege. Handedness is not chosen or bestowed, right? It just happens. So as right-handed people, we are privileged in that most things are designed for us in the right-handed world. It's very much a right-handed world. And then let's go talk about the right-handed people. We can't avoid the benefits that we receive. We don't really choose those benefits because they're institutionalized and they are systemic. It's a systemic nature of privilege that we just get it. We just get that privilege as being right-handed because of the way the history and the way that we've developed around it. Handedness also allows people to say, well, I'm not personally responsible for the oppression of left-handed people, right? Didn't mean to, that's not something you go out to do and do every day, and nor have people in the past necessarily that's been their intent. But there's an understanding that we've inherited this system that has benefits for some and disadvantages for others.
And I'm just curious, and feel free to not respond. I'm just curious if any of you put down goals for your college or for your institution that address diversity. Double the number of women in your engineering program. Okay, great. Increase the number of female faculty to 25%. Okay, just curious as to the goals that you wrote, and granted, you were struggling to think and write at the same time, I acknowledge that. But I encourage you to think about the goals that you have for your institution and to question whether diversity is in there. Is it in your strategic plan? And what does it mean, I guess? How important is it?
If your ancestors were forced to come to the USA or the country that you consider your country of origin, not by choice, they were forced there, take one step back. If prior to age 18 you took a vacation outside of your country of origin, take one step forward. If one of your parents did not complete secondary school, high school or secondary school or anything before that, take one step back. If your family owned their own home when you were growing up, take one step forward. If you saw members of your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or physical ability portrayed on television in degrading roles, take one step back. If you have ever been stopped or questioned by police or some authoritative body because of your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or physical ability, take one step back. If you have ever felt uncomfortable about a joke related to your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or physical ability, take one step back. We're going to talk here in just a few minutes about the iceberg model. And we use the iceberg to talk about there are certain things that are above the water that you can see, and there are lots of things below the water that you can't see. So sometimes it's not just about what we can see that's different. It's also about things that are below the water that we cannot see that are different as well.
Because we all have our biases. And so we want to talk about ways, one, first to identify them, what they are, and then to sort of work against them. And so one of the things that we see that, and a lot of the research has been done in this area about bias, that particularly when it comes to gender, men and women don't differ too much. So what that means is that women, well, you kind of look, this is like sort of a pecking order. You have at the top of that white males, particularly in the STEM areas. Then you may have just males in general, and then you have women, and then you have women of color. And the one on the bottom gets beat up not only by men, but by women. That is, women are catching hell. And I think the statistics that Bev had put up earlier supports that. We like data. That supports that. And so how do we flip that script? How do we change that thing around? And so we want to talk about ways in which we can sort of do that.
Lack of experience potentially is one of the harder barriers that we have. Now, to get people to see that they've had that lack of experience, I think we have a window of opportunity when all of a sudden they see that things are different. And usually it takes, in my experience, especially with faculty, it takes data.
Dealing with a faculty member is a very sensitive sort of thing because as a faculty, you're God or the goddess of your classroom, and you feel anything you say should be okay, freedom of speech. And there's a lot of autonomy there. You know, even your chair, if you're a full tenured faculty member, or your dean, or even your president could have problems with you, could do nothing with you, you know, because you have tenure and all that sort of stuff. And so you're dealing with, you know, something that's a real challenge. And so what I found is that because of my experience, I already know that going in. So the goal that or the thing I ask myself is, what do I want to accomplish? Do I want to, you know, show my authority as a chief diversity officer and look, I'm the boss of you, or do I want to achieve my goal? And the best way to do that, or one way to do that, at least I find that I've had reasonable success, is to bring in the data. Well, one thing that a chief diversity officer does is that we work with the search committee, you know, throughout that entire process. And so each school has what they call an affirmative action plan. And in that affirmative action plan, it has all the data, demographic of all the full-time and sometimes part-time employees. And it breaks it down by job titles. And so we'll have this information for a particular department. So I will meet with the chair of that department, and I'll go to faculty meetings, and I'll share this information, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the accuracy of the data, and if you believe it's not accurate, kick it back to us, and we'll make it right, because you want them to be comfortable that they're part of this process. And then we start talking about how, now that we've agreed the data's cool, and I look at it and say, well, you're underutilized where there are women. What up? What you gonna do about it? When you're doing an evaluation or any of those sorts of things, embrace your biases. There have been studies where they've asked people, you know, are you biased? And of course, or better yet, are you totally objective? And people says, no, I am totally objective about everything. I have no biases. And then you will have some people that will say, yes, I have some biases, and these are what they are. And when they went to test this group of folks, they found that the people who claim to have no bias tend to be more biased than the people who say yes. And why? Because they're aware of it, they act on it, and that's what you need to do as an individual. Identify what are things you like and don't like. That doesn't make you an evil person. You know, making assumptions does not make you an evil person. You know, you want to sit down in a chair, it's reasonable to assume that gravity still pulls you down, you sit down. You know, but you have to verify that, you know, with physical fact. We're scientists and engineers and what have you, so we want to use that to its great advantage.
Just so you know, I've done research in diversity for, I don't know.
A long time.
A long time. Yeah, like 20-ish years. And I am slightly biased toward men in science. Me. And I are a woman in science. So it's one of those things that if you can go in and recognize your biases and then think about how to address them and admit them, and then what is the process for checking? That's really what you want people to think about, is to check themselves. Because, like, for example, even if in a vote, and you take women's votes, women are not as likely to vote for other women as they are for men because of these biases. So you have to be careful about the biases. My thing is, and I've had students, graduate students, who go, okay, I'm done, I have no more biases. And I'm like, okay, we're not done with you. I have failed somewhere, because the bottom line is we all have and will keep our biases. It's a matter of recognizing them and learning to do things to compensate for our biases.
Obviously we want to get our diverse campuses. We want to get a strong and talented faculty pool. And, one of the ways that we do that is that, our search committees, and that, when I say search committee, I'm using it in a very generic sort of sense, because really when you talk about your hiring process, everyone is really involved in that in some form or fashion, whether it's the dean, the chair, the provost, your chief financial officer, your faculty, your students, all of them sort of play into that. So this thing about bias and how do we make this happen is really a cultural thing for your campus. And so how do we get there? Well, one way to do that, and how do we take this huge problem and then narrow it down into small bits? And so I'm just going to focus on this very small thing so that you can have something. We want you to have take-home, something that you can actually use. And so one of the things that you would want to do is to train as best you can your search committees. But if your schools are like my schools, your search committees are faculty members that are too busy, say, I want release time. Are y'all giving them release time to do searches? Talk to me, deans. Tell the truth, shame the devil. No, okay, right. And so a lot of times this is done in a stressful sort of situation. The faculty says, well, I'm doing the very best I can. I got to do my research, got to teach, and all this other sort of stuff. And now you want me to sit and look at this? Yeah, I do. Because this is going to be your colleague, and you're going to be either complaining about this person or working with this person. And so you got to pitch it to them this way that, hey, you want me to do it? And then you'll come back and say, well, I'm a dean, and now the dean has decided, administration is putting their big hand down on me. In fact, it's a funny sort of thing. When I made the switch to become an associate dean, one of my colleagues had said to me, you've crossed over to the dark side, And so already you have this sort of wall between you and the faculty, and the idea is to bring them into that process.
One of the very interesting conversations I heard in here that I thought was really good was people talking about there is a line of acceptability. These people are qualified to do the position. These people are not. So now, out of this group of qualified individuals, what are you using to make your decision regarding the hire? And I put that out there to you because I find that people are often reluctant to look at, and I'll call them individual characteristics, personal characteristics of an applicant. No problem discussing how much money they've raised, or how many papers they've published, or how long their postdoc was, and who they postdoc for, and who their major professor was, and what school they went to. Well, sometimes that can get a little dicey. But there's never, I've rarely heard anyone confess, and I say it that way, confess, to, I want this person because this person adds diversity to my department. And the question is that right or wrong? Is that something that we should not try to do?
When you do your charge of search committee, everyone there is responsible for that diversity. So when I speak to a search committee, I say all of you are responsible for the diversification of this workforce here. And each of you have to advocate, strongly for this sort of thing if this is our mission. If not, then we need to have another conversation.
One practice that I have at the school is that I request that the 3 finalists that I interview, because I try to interview as many as possible from every search, is qualified women or underrepresented minority. So this is a kind of a practice that I have, and at the beginning it was taken very kind of in a sour way, but now everybody does their best to bring a qualified woman or underrepresented minority. I think this has changed dramatically the way people look at the searches.
Very successful. We had a committee that reviewed the pool. And no pool could go into the interview stage unless it had a discussion about was it appropriately diverse. Mm-hmm. It's not about the candidate necessarily. This takes that discussion one step back. It's about the pool. Were you able to recruit a diverse pool for that position? And I think it starts the conversations earlier. And then if the pool's diverse, then it's about the best, the best candidate and the acceptable. I agree with the acceptable candidate. We don't allow ranking. We only allow, and we don't vote. Then we only allow is the candidate acceptable or not acceptable. So, but if you can take one more step in the process, backward in the process, I do think that in the long run, it will serve you well. It's served Purdue very well in the last growth initiative, and will be repeated in this growth initiative as well.
So now what happens is you have this list, this Uber list of all of these different organizations. And when a faculty member comes or interviews, or someone interviews, you can show them this list and say, is there any group here that you would like to meet with? You choose. I'm not going to presume that because you are a female that you want to meet with the women faculty in the College of Engineering. I'm not going to presume that because you're an African American, you want to meet with the president of the Black Caucus at Virginia Tech. But what I'm doing is I'm giving you the opportunity to select the groups that you would like to meet with where you would feel comfortable, something that would offer you support within the institution. And there is no presumption about who it is you'd want to meet with. That's an easy way for, if you are bringing in a diverse candidate, to put in front of them this list, and they can see these diverse organizations, and they might decide, well, wow, that's great. Let me meet with the Black Caucus. That way I can find out about the African American community here. As opposed to, obviously, you would want to meet with this group because that's the group that you affiliate with.
Because there are no best practices that are completely
Right.
transferable.
Right.
They're promising
Find out what
practices.
works for you and your institution.
Right. You have to understand who you are, who your institution is, and what will and won't work. Though you should always strive for stretching, but I don't know that anything is directly transferable. So how do you, policy-wise, how do you make that transfer? And because we know a lot about what works, but what's going to work for your institution? And I think that's where the conversations like what we had today, that's where these deans went away going, we haven't tried that one.
If that search committee is not educated about their own bias, that person who is a woman who is representing the women on that group may actually be doing worse than the white male if we make him the bad guy in this particular sort of thing.
In engineering, if we don't embrace the underrepresented majority, then we are really limiting the diversity of thought that we could have as a profession.
So we have to kind of get away from all of this sort of bean counting and really train people to do the job that they need to do. And we will have arrived when we can get a bunch of white men up there, and then they hire all these, Black and Latino and Indian women, because they're great, and it truly be that. But
And white men in engineering are at the top. If we can't get their participation and their active support in working with and towards diversity, we're missing a critical component. Critical. So I put that out to you. I think that it is not just the African Americans' job to raise the voice for African Americans, and it's not just the women's job to raise the voice and issues associated with women. It is everyone's job.